Welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2025. The third of our talks coming right up with help from our platinum sponsors, Accessibility Cloud and Intopia. You can find Inclusive Design 24 on both Blue Sky and Mastodon. And if you have questions for our speakers, post them with the hashtag ID24 or chuck a comment onto our YouTube channel and we'll scoop them all up and put them to our speaker towards the end of the session. Quick reminder that Inclusive Design 24 is a respectful community, and you'll find our code of conduct linked from the bottom of every page from the inclusivedesign24.org website. Right now, I am delighted to welcome Ross Mullen as my guest host for this session. And without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Ross.
Thank you, Lione. Next up, we have Dom talking about Press Start, accessible game design and cerebral palsy. Over to you, Dom.
Thank you, Leonie. Thank you, Ross, for that wonderful introduction. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to this talk. This is a new talk for me, so we'll see how this goes. Before I begin my talk, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land in which we meet and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm fortunate enough that I get to live and work on the land of the Camaragal people in Sydney, Australia. I am so lucky to be surrounded by such beautiful bushland where I can hear gorgeous bird calls of the native birds to this land. A connection to country is really strong for me by listening to cockatoos screech, kookaburras laugh, and fairy wrens chirp. And I can really see such vibrant coloured feathers of the native birds of this beautiful country. I would also like to acknowledge there is lived experience of people with cerebral palsy and other disabilities and their families, and all of these insights help shape accessible and inclusive design. So, hello. My name is Dom Parker. My pronouns are she, her. A really quick ID of me for those who might find it useful. I am a Caucasian woman in my 30s. I have visible tattoos. I have long, wavy brown hair, and I wear black framed glasses with yellow lenses because I have severe glare sensitivity. My day job is I am an e-learning coordinator at Cerebral Palsy Alliance, where I design and deliver online learning for disability support practitioners, therapists, research professionals, and families. I'm really lucky that I get to work in the top 1% of early intervention research in cerebral palsy, and I contribute to projects that drive innovation and shape international best practices. Aside from that, I'm also an accessible game designer and audio designer, and I've always been passionate about inclusive technology and play. And my background is in learning design, game accessibility consulting, and audio and game development. So I will just quickly cover what we're going to talk about in this session. We will start with why accessible game design matters for children and infants with cerebral palsy. We're also going to discuss neuroplasticity and accessible game support and how it supports early intervention. And we're going to look at some key design strategies for technologies for inclusive play. I would also really like to preface that I am a game designer. I am not a therapist. So I'm coming at this from the lens of a game designer and game developer looking to make accessible technology that can be used in therapy sessions by infants, families, and therapists. So again, really strong preface. I am a game designer. I am not a therapist. So before we can even talk about any of that stuff, let's just quickly go over the context and comprehension. So first off, what is cerebral palsy? Cerebral palsy is a neuromuscular disability that affects your movement, balance, posture, and coordination. It is normally caused by damage to the developing brain. So between the ages of 0 to 3, it can happen before, during, after birth. The main things with cerebral palsy is it will impact your muscle control, communication, and access to learning and play sometimes. But what's important about cerebral palsy, it is a permanent thing, but it is not a progressive thing. So cerebral palsy is the most common physical disability in childhood. In Australia, where I live and work, 34,000 Australians live with CP. There are 17 million people worldwide who have cerebral palsy, and 1 in 700 Australian babies are diagnosed with CP. And that number has actually gone down over the last 15 years. CP may lack traditional risk factors as well, and recent research actually highlights there's a significant genetic component as well. But there are many different ways one could acquire CP. It could be a neonatal stroke, anything that could be damage to a developing brain, as cerebral palsy is in fact a brain injury. So understanding CP. So when a diagnosis of CP comes along, there are often things called comorbidities that go hand in hand with that diagnosis. So that could be something like a vision or a hearing impairment. It could be a behavior or a sleep disorder. It could be ongoing pain. And there could be challenges with communication and your musculoskeletal form. For infants, which is the range that we're talking about today with game design, the most common comorbidities for infants would be something related to sleep, dysphagia, and of course, epilepsy. It is really important to know about comorbidities, as every person with CP has a different array of them. So then let's go on to video game accessibility. So why video game accessibility and what actually is that? So a video game that is accessible is a game that should be accessed, engaged, played, and completed by anyone. It should be designed with different user groups in mind, and the difficulty of the game is not a blocker to completing it. People like to play games for the challenge, and we don't want the challenge to become a blocker. Video games are the most consumed media on the planet. This industry generates between $200 to $237 billion in revenue. That is more than music, and that is more than movies. It's also a massive global community. There are 3.3 billion people who play games, and that's about 42% of the global population. And it's also about universal participation. So video games foster connection and social interaction by spanning all ages, backgrounds, regions, and it makes it one of the most inclusive forms of entertainment. And it's really important to understand that as the video game industry continues to grow, because it has by no means stopped growing, so does the responsibility to ensure that all games are welcoming and usable for everyone, no matter their age group or disability. So then the question you're probably asking me is, but Dom, why video games in therapy? Because they give motivation and engagement is the first point. So video games can provide immediate feedback, rewards, and a sense of achievement, which are really key drivers for therapeutic change. It also has repetition and practice, and many games will encourage a repetitive movement and practice, which is great for motor learning and brain adaptation. The other great thing is it has customizable difficulty. So games can be tailored to individual ability, which allows progression at the right pace for everyone who plays the game. And it opens opportunities for participation, socialization, and communication that might not be a traditional way of communicating. Going back to what this talk is about, press start. We're pressing start on early intervention with video games that are accessibly designed and inclusively designed to help people progress. And the best way to do that is through a game, because children are really naturally curious. And games, overall, why do we have games in therapy? Is because therapy has to be fun and it has to be engaging. And video games are fantastic for that. And we can achieve all this with this really cool fancy word I learned at the start of the year, which is neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity is the brain's incredible ability to adapt, change, and form new connections. It is most prominent in infancy between the ages of 0 to 3. And this adaptability can also reorganize itself throughout life. So even if you have an injury and you're relearning something, that is neuroplasticity. I've recently been in physio for my shoulder, and I turned to my physiotherapist and said, "Is this just neuroplasticity?" And she laughed and said, "Yes, it is neuroplasticity. It's the way our brain learns or relearns something." So this adaptability of neuroplasticity enables the brain to form a new neural pathway or connection, or it can strengthen an existing one, which is kind of what's used in rehab, or it can even transfer a function between different regions of the brain, especially, again, following an injury or during periods of intense learning. Now, there are two types of neuroplasticity. There is functional neuroplasticity, which refers to the brain's capacity to shift functions from damaged areas into healthier regions. And then there is structural neuroplasticity. So this involves physical change in the brain's structure, and it forms new connections due to learning or practice. So neuroplasticity is particularly pronounced during childhood when the brain is rapidly developing and creating millions of new connections every second. However, this ability continues throughout life, as I've said already, and it allows us to learn new skills, adjust to changes, and recover from injuries. When we're playing a video game, I would argue we are essentially using a minor form of neuroplasticity as we learn to play a game or do something new. So for children with cerebral palsy, we have to harness neuroplasticity through engaging, repetitive, and motivating activities, such as video games, play, and fun. And this can also greatly enhance motor learning, skill development, and functional recovery. So how do we bring all of this together? We've got video games, we've got understanding CP, and we've got neuroplasticity. So all of this can lead to early intervention, which can then harness neuroplasticity through early detection. So the number one thing we can do is actually just start early. When you are injured as an adult, when you are injured, you do not wait 6 months to a year before you start treating that injury. You start straight away. If you have a stroke, you start straight away. It's the same principle that applies to early intervention with cerebral palsy. So early diagnosis and intervention are crucial for children with cerebral palsy and any other disability, as the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to recognize and form neural connections, is greatest in early life. It's the strongest presence when we are young, between the ages of 0 to 3. It also maximizes and prevents secondary impairments, and it also supports parent well-being too, because parents are going to be the caregivers of that child. And this is where accessible video games can come in. Accessible video games can provide repetitive, motivating, and varied practice needed to drive neuroplastic change, and it can create a really powerful tool for therapy and skill development, because it's also really fun as well. And then children don't really realize they're doing therapy because they're having so much fun and they're playing because it's enjoyment. They're having fun and therefore they're going to learn more and the neuroplasticity will take play. But what's really important for this to work is we have to look at the design principles for video games for this age group. Now, when I talk about the age group, I'm referring again to infancy. This is between the ages of 0 to 3. So these design principles would be as followed. We need immediate clear feedback. We need input flexibility. We need touch target size and placement. That's going to be one of the key topics that we'll talk about this session. Scaffolded progression, social interaction and shared play. And of course, it has to be usable for parents and therapists and anyone else. So this is universal good design as a whole. This applies to a lot of different areas, if not all different areas. But so if you can do these, then the game will be accessible for everyone and used throughout therapy. So input flexibility. This is supporting multiple different input methods, as not all kids or adults actually will be able to use technology in the same way. So we're talking about eye gaze systems, different switches, adaptive controllers, touching and using a mouse. We've got scaffolded progression. So this is a simple one-tap sort of solution that can again broaden into multiple taps. So when the challenge can become more complex through scaffolded progression, and we can customize that as well to give the benefit of when something becomes too easy in therapy, we can then make it a little bit harder. Then we've got clear, immediate feedback. This we'll talk about a little bit more as well. So every action, like a tap, a look, or a press, needs to produce something really obvious. And that could be a light up sound, it could be an animation, it could be a vibration. It has to be immediate because then it reduces confusion and frustration if nothing's happening, but it also builds learning to know that when I interact with this will happen. And the last thing, of course, is social interaction and shared play. It needs to be fun, it needs to be engaging, and needs to support development. So simple, concise, really clear items or scaffold basically for the game. Then of course, the overarching one that we need to get our heads around when it comes to accessible design is it has to be usable for parents and therapists. It's really important to remember, and this is something that I've learned at the start of the year, is that infants, especially those with higher needs or disability, they play a lot of games with adult assistance. So that means the game should be easy to install, it should be easy to configure, and it should adapt as the child grows as their needs change. And this can fall under really simple things like clear instructions and progressive onboarding. And the video games have, really clear, concise ideas so that someone who's not techie, or if the therapist isn't there, they can just get started straight away in a plug and play style, fresh out of the box. We can also use ideas such as neuroplasticity with really simple ideas of touch targets, which we'll talk about a bit later, and being able to hold gazes as scaffolding progression. So there's 2 case studies we're going to look at for this talk. Please note, again, these children are not real. These are hypothetical scenarios. And another note, again, just to reinforce, I'm a game designer. I am not a therapist. We're looking at this from the idea of how we can design games to be accessible for infants with cerebral palsy to help their early intervention progress. So let's meet our 2 hypothetical children. We've got Axel and we've got Rosie. So let's start with Axel. So Axel, let's say, is a non-verbal child who is learning keyword sign to communicate, which is very simple signed language gestures. And since he's non-verbal, he'll probably rely on a tablet a lot or some sort of communication device. Let's say Axel has a cognitive impairment, so he needs a low cognitive load with really clear cause-effect feedback. And let's say Axel also loves noise. He likes noisy toys, and he's also a bit of a copycat. So he learns by modeling, and he learns by, copying his family's actions. And then let's have a look at Rosie. So let's say Rosie might use an eye gaze system for access. She might not have a lot of control over her arms or her legs, so she might need to use her eyes for eye gaze systems. And she benefits from eye gaze enabled games with scaffolding. And let's say that, she likes to explore because she's very social. She's a social kid. She likes exploring ideas and talking through her own way of, using an eye gaze system again, and it can progress from exploratory play. So those are our 2 case studies. So let's say we meet Axel first. Let's say he's 2 years old. So he's kind of in the middle of the range of an infant that we're looking at. Let's say an assessment came back and he's a level 2 on the GMFCS, which is the Gross Motor Function Classification System. So he might not have that strong of a motor ability yet because he might use a walker sometimes, or he might use orthosis or something to just kind of get around. Again, he would be nonverbal and he communicates with a tablet with very simple phrases pre-installed. But again, he loves noisy toys and he loves copying his parents. That's a really cool idea straight away. So how can we focus on a game design for this? So if I were to design a game for Axel, I would look at a way that we could kind of design it to be the precursor to what he might be doing in the future, which is using his tablet to communicate. He might, end up using switches. He might be using buttons to control different things. If he ends up in a mobility device, he'll probably need to learn switching again. So we need something that is got large touch targets for him to be able to press on tablets. We need something that gives really, really clear feedback. And we need something that can kind of do a social copycat play. So if I were to design a game for Axel, it might look something like this. So the design focus here is it's a very simple game on an iPad or a tablet or a phone that you just press the drum and it makes a sound and, some vibrations appear on screen. That could be a really simple idea for him to get used to pressing buttons to get feedback. So let's look at the design focus. This is all made in Canva, by the way, so it is by no means professional, but it kind of gives you the idea. So for those who can't see it, on the screen, I just have a blue rectangle. I have a picture of a snare drum, and there's a white circle around that snare drum, which is the touch target indicator. In white letters at the top, it says tap the drum as our instruction. And then once the drum gets tapped, we have these lines on the side, which are kind of like, they look a bit like Wi-Fi lines, but they're green and they kind of indicate that something's happening visually as long as audibly. On the top left corner there, I have the exit function, which is the cross with the letters exit. And then on the right-hand side, I have a white meter with a green indicator in the meter. So let's break this down a bit further. We have clear instructions and feedback. The instruction is tap the drum. Once you tap the drum, It plays a sound and there's a visual cue as well as an audio cue. That's a secondary channel. And that confirms the action of what's happening, which can then enhance neuroplasticity. I know when I touch this, it's going to do something and it's going to give me some feedback. The touch target is really large. It's larger than normal. And it's a really big space button that could be easy to access for Axel as well as his parents, as well as his therapist. We could even take it one step further and have the ability to reduce that touch target just by pinching it or maybe dragging it a bit more to make it larger or smaller, which could be our very basic scaffolded progression in this part. So the scenario of how this might work is little Axel plays this tablet game and we're pressing a large button will trigger the drum sounds and animation. We could even go one step further and engage with the parents to say, hey, when Axel presses the drum, dance along with it, have a copycat situation. So when he presses that drum, it makes the noise and his parents could dance a little bit. So going a bit further into touch target sizes, we need to make sure the buttons are at least 44 by 44 pixels, which is Apple standards, and 48 by 48 dp for Android as a minimum. But often the larger the touch size is, the better it is for a child, especially those with motor functions or limited dexterity. We're trying to be really consistent again with really high contrast visuals too. So just simple black on white or, a really bright green on a dark blue to really help stand out and give more confidence as to what's going on in the game. Again, with the secondary indicators, we have really, really clear visual and audio feedback when the drum is activated. We could even animate the drum too. We can have it spin around. We can have it grow, enlarge, and reduce. And we could have, even more. We can even make it vibrate if it's on a phone. That could be pretty cool. And then, the copycat imitation. So maybe the parent or the therapist presses first. The meter on the side would indicate taking turns so as not to keep pressing. And then it will be Axel's turn. It could be the infant's turn to press. So this design, while very basic, it should make it really easy for parents to participate as well, regardless of tech skills. It could be a web browser app, or it could be like an Android or iPhone app that just downloads straight onto their device, and they can just go from there with a very clear function to exit. So summing up Axel, we need a really simple game with large space buttons. We need very clear audio and visual feedback. We can have a turn-taking prompt, which is kind of what the meter is for time. So once that meter runs out, then it's someone else's turn. We can also have, again, really, really clear high contrast visuals to make it really easy, very clear instructions that could even be voiced to read out when that meter runs out. We could have it again saying tap the drum, Axel taps the drum, and we're away. And really, really clear instructions so that when the therapist isn't there or the game designer's not there, the parents can just do this straight out of the box and ready to go. So that's Axel. Let's touch on Rosie. So let's say Rosie is 3. She's probably a bit older now. She's probably going to daycare and stuff. She's probably having a great time. Let's say that her gross motor function is on the higher scale. Let's say she's level 4. So she might use powered mobility and really require physical assistance. Let's say she has really limited motor functions in her arms and her legs. She might be what's called ataxic. So her arms and legs are a bit more floppy as the muscles don't really do much there. And let's say her main way of communicating would be an eye gaze system. So we can't really use the tap function as we did with Axel because he has more flexibility and motor power in his hands. So we need to design something that is great for pointer alternatives. So an eye gaze system for Rosie and touching for adults to adjust their playing with her by touching the screen with their fingers, or maybe a mouse, as the pointer alternative would then be the eye gaze, the mouse, and touching with fingers on the device. Let's also chat about, she's really social, she's really curious. So we can really include scaffolded progression there to enhance her curiosity too. So maybe she likes to explore the games, and we can definitely progress that in a really purposeful play and task idea. Social features, we can again have the taking turns feature, which is really great. So we can take turns, we can even maybe share achievements and fuel her love of interaction and amplify motivation. So these kind of reinforce our systems of offering, true independence. So maybe this game has to, no, not maybe, Dom, it has to be usable by Rosie as well. Even though she might need physical assistance to set it up, she can just play the game without anyone there. So here's the idea I would have for Rosie. Again, made in Canva, really, really basic, but it's kind of like this garden game. So on the screen here, we have another rectangle. There's a very basic trademark canvas snail in the bottom right with a speech bubble, which says water the flower. And then to the left of that, we have a rather large flower bush, again from Canva. And there's a black circle around one of the flowers. And that would be our pointer to kind of know that's what you're looking at, or that's what you're hovering over, or that's what you're touching. This would be your eye gaze pointer. And while holding your gaze on that flower, there would be the meter, which then you have to hold your gaze long enough to actually water the flower. Once the meter is full, the flower would bloom. And then we also have our exit button in the top right corner. So for Rosie, we have the eye gaze system, which is her pointer alternative would be her eyes. Her parents, we could even hook this up to a mouse and have the mouse be in there, or we could just have a touch screen and have parents just touch the screen. There are multiple access options, and this should be able to be switched pretty seamlessly. So we can just plug a mouse in and it will go from there, or we can recognize that it's an eye gaze, or we can recognize that someone's touching the screen. This game could also be really social. It's shared play. Again, it's turn taking, it's sharing achievements of, hey, I made this flower bloom and it was great. So if Rosie's main form of independence comes from the eye gaze, that's great. And she can play this game without any setting up, aside from someone physically mounting it onto her chair or where she is. She could probably navigate to this herself with, if we're using an iPad, it could be, using Apple's inbuilt eye gaze technology to navigate and go onto it. But in order to do that, let's say Rosie has had enough training in her young time to be able to hold her gaze really well. So she has to learn how to hold her gaze on that flower to make it bloom. And the meter, we can adjust the meter as well. We could say hold it for 3 seconds, hold it for 5 seconds, hold it for 1 second or 2 seconds. And that could be our scaffolded progression, where you have to water larger flowers by looking at it for longer to then have it grow. So all of these actions should be accessible no matter what input we use. So again, with a mouse, we could just hover over the mouse or hold down with touch. And the instruction should be really clear. It could come from a snail. We could have another level where it could be a bee or something like that, or a bird we can change for more interaction and more curiosity. So what does the snail tell me? What does the bird tell me? What does the bee tell me? And that could be really engaging as well. And again, the social feature. If Rosie's really social, then we need to be playing alongside a parent. We could even have, a share function if we wanted. We could have, once this flower's bloomed, we could take a screenshot. The parent could tap that, or we can look over with our eye gaze system and tap that and have a photo to share. So all of these are just like little details we can maybe use to understand how we could do something for a child that has a more severe motor impairment and might just use their eyes. And again, it has to be fun, it has to be relevant. So here's a table summary of both of the hypothetical children we talked about. So for Axel, we had really large touch targets and feedback for motor and cognitive gains. And the game invites family participation, and that could be done either verbally by the therapist or designer, or they could come up with this on their own. We could even have like a little drop-down menu to say, if you're going to make this more engaging and social, get involved. For Rosie, we could have multiple input modes for independence and support, and plus the social and shared play as a key motivator. We had our examples, of large spaced buttons, drums, and animations. We had turn taking for copycat modes, prompting parents and children to take turns. And then we have, that was for Axel. And then why does it matter for Axel? Well, this supports Axel's fine motor skills, and it reinforces cause and effect learning, and it reduces frustration as well by immediate feedback. It can also build upon family bonding, imitation to continue the copycat learning. It could also be a great way to learn how to communicate, and it's shared engagement. For Rosie, we have our multiple access methods and our eye gaze and touch controls. And why that matters is it makes sure that Rosie is independent and has, while she needs some support from the adults, it can be flexible for different needs and she could play this game without them. And then we have, shared and social interactions for games, turn taking, shared achievements, collaborative efforts. And that's important because it encourages social skills, motivation, and inclusion with different people. So overall, when we're designing games for infants or really low-level games, we need to make sure they're not very difficult. We need to make sure that we have all of the right access methods. We need to make sure it's usable when we're not there. And we need to make sure it's actually fun, because if it's not fun, then the child will not engage with it. So key learnings from this talk. When you're designing games that might be useful and used in therapy for infants, it's really important to consider the following. And again, I'll be saying this a lot because it is really important, because designing games for kids is going to be very different to designing a game like Call of Duty or Mortal Kombat. They're completely different games, and these are more specifically trained towards, therapeutic needs as well. So we need large, well-spaced touch targets, which is essential for infants and children with fine motor challenges, and it helps reduce frustration and allow success with minimal effort. We need input flexibility. We need to be able to support various access methods such as eye gazing, touches, and switches, and ensures that both the child and the adults, such as parents, therapists, family members, teachers, can control the game in ways that suit their needs and abilities. We need clear, immediate feedback. So every action should have an obvious outcome, such as visuals, sounds, or vibrations, so that infants and adults know exactly what's happening. We need scaffolded progression. Games should start simple and then gradually increase in complexity. We can control that ourselves. And that allows infants to build the skill and confidence without being overwhelmed straight away. Again, we can change the size of an Axel's touch target. We can change how long Rosie has to hold her eye gaze for. Usability for all. It has to be, again, used for adults, therapists, family members, teachers, carers, support practitioners. Everyone has to use it. So the GUI, so the general user interface, has to be really simple. An exit button on the side, really clear instructions, and a controllable meter. So these design features should be clear and forgiving as well for players and therapists who may be setting up, demonstrating, or playing alongside the child. It should be easy enough for everyone to understand. Then we've got, again, social and shared experiences. We need design features that encourage joint play, intimidation, and turn-taking therapy that is about learning. I'll restart my sentence because that made no sense to me. I'm so sorry. Design features that encourage joint play, imitation, and turn-taking therapy and learning are more effective and also memorable when they include joyful, shared moments between children and adults. And the final thing is the therapeutic and developmental value. We're prioritizing accessibility and usability because it not only makes play actually possible, it actually also supports therapy, it supports cognitive development, motor development, and can also empower families who may have no idea what they're doing about building a relationship with their child through this piece of technology in this game to make therapy more fun. So before I wrap up, I just wanted to really quickly say again that when you're designing games, it has to be usable, it has to be accessible, and that means that a therapist can unlock the child's potential by making therapy even more fun. So I really hope that this talk inspired game designers and developers out there to think a bit more simply about when we're designing games for education and therapy. Really simple ideas can go such a long way, especially with therapists and families who may not be tech savvy, who may not understand all the input methods or even understand what the code does. By having it as simple as possible, they can get so much out of their child's further development. Thank you all so much for your time on this new talk. Yeah, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. That was incredibly interesting. It's such a great topic, and yeah, two aspects, gaming and particularly around cerebral palsy. Just yeah, is not something I've heard a great deal about over the years. So it was, yeah, really interesting to be able to listen to you now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ross, do we have any questions that came in?
Yes, we do. First of all, there is one. Let me see. Are there any games you have seen that incorporate some of these concepts, maybe just to see it in use?
Yes, there are various games made across multiple locations around the world. There is a company in the UK which does a lot of eye gaze-based games, and those are used in therapy. And those are incredibly simple. Again, holding your gaze on birds, holding your gaze to, like, slap pies. Again, revealing puzzle games. What is that company called? It will come to me, and I will post it. And they do a bunch of learning games based around that, and they can be used across communication devices and iPads as well. So there are plenty out there. You can even Google, like, I think it's eye gaze games for kids, and a bunch come up that are also like independent developers will get on this as well. They might be browser based, or they might be an app to download. There's so much great content out there, especially for infants while they're learning.
Awesome. There's one more I'd like to ask.
Mhm.
You mentioned about neuroplasticity in youngsters. Would
Yeah.
it be more difficult designing games for adults where that plasticity is more rigid?
That's a great question. I think by following the same principles and, just having really simple concepts, that can translate to all forms of neuroplasticity. So like I said, I'm currently in therapy for my shoulder. I'm my physiotherapist, and we're just doing really simple movements. But that applies to all levels of, even if like a 6-year-old hurt their shoulder, they will be doing the same movement to kind of get it back. So for an adult who's relearning something or needs to learn something, I think a very similar concept would actually work quite well, because we are just doing simple feedback. We're initiating simple feedback, we're holding things. So I think that concept would be quite similar. You could just obviously change it to make it a bit more interesting for an adult. It doesn't have to be like a snail in a garden or tapping a drum. It could cater to whatever that adult is interested in as well. The same concept, it can just be moved across various interests and design prints, and like aesthetic wise as well.
There is
Right.
one or two more. Leonie, have
I'm
we got
just going
room
to
for two
sneak
more?
in with, yeah, we've got time. That's no problem. But can I just sneak in with a question that I think sort of tips off what you were just talking about, and in sort of game design generally, there's a real fine line, I think, between when a game is challenging enough before it becomes too challenging.
Yeah.
How do you approach that with games like this, for this group of audiences?
Yeah, that's a great question, Leonie. So I try to make these games as simple as I can, and I kind of have to take a step back. And I'm quite lucky because I work for Cerebral Palsy Alliance, and I have, I see this kind of all the time in real life, and I look at some of the interventions that go on, and I think, okay, well, that might be really, really hard for someone, but it might be really easy for someone else. So I kind of look at this and I think, okay, so what are the minimum requirements I need for this? And again, with touch targets, just having the ability to reduce them a little bit or expand them or even make the image a bit bigger as well
Right.
would be
Yeah.
kind of my way of scaffolding it.
Mhm.
I also try to use really large, simple ideas. So again, like just tap a drum, like water a flower, like really simple ideas that are kind of everyday in a child's life, like walking past the flowers or, going to school and, engaging in music. Because my background is also in music teaching. So it just kind of why I went down the route of like tapping a drum or getting engaged in a musical instrument.
Mhm.
So I kind of think of ideas of, okay, what makes a child light up? It's like, it's really simple things that they learn to understand of, like, when you water a flower will grow. Like when you tap or play a musical instrument, it makes a sound. So I kind of go off those and I think, okay, well, how can we make this more difficult? We could have, like, try to have multiple taps. It could then turn into a rhythm game. We could have, like a concentration-based game of like holding for longer, but then what if the flower tilts like left or right? Then we have to like, make sure our gaze goes with it. So I kind of think of like ideas from the real world that I think could then translate into a game and then scaffold that progression by having like it, and then have it easy to control the scaffolding progression by having something like easy, medium, hard.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great answer. Ross, sounds like we have some more questions.
Yes, there's one I'd like to ask. I'm a massive fan of measuring things. How would
Yes.
you measure whether something is effective in a therapeutic context beyond self-reported enjoyment? How would you do that?
That is a great question. So I would give the prototype of a game to a therapist who has capacity to maybe try something, and then I'd let them run with it. Because again, I'm not a qualified therapist. I would give it to a therapist who's using it in real time, and then get the report back and say, "Hey, we actually quite like this, but we found it was lagging, or we found there was something wrong with it." And then I'd go back and try and measure, maybe fix that bug, and then go back. I give that bug back and then give it to a therapist. This all happened as well in real life. So therapists will come back and say, that really worked, but we found it got too easy after a while. And then I would measure and go, okay, that's a bit too easy. Let's make it a bit harder. Or they've gone through all the difficulty levels. And then we go, okay, maybe they've outgrown that game. So what else do we have? And I think like when it gets to the point where the child can play everything on every difficulty, then I think I've done my job. That is easy enough for them to do it. And then we can move on to something a bit harder. Like then they could invest in like other games for their specific device rather than like a ubiquitous app. So if the child is able to beat the game, essentially, then I know I've succeeded.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think there's just time for one more question. This is a little bit more broader. Are there examples where accessibility features for therapy have overlapped with features that improve the gameplay for all players?
Yes, there are tons of those. I think one of the leading drivers of that is actually the development of accessible controls. There is a really, really great guy. His name is Christopher Hills, I believe. He's based in Queensland, and he's got CP, and he actually flies a drone with switches, which is incredibly cool. I'd highly recommend to check that out. And it gets to the point that, he's probably also played games in his life. A lot of people grow up playing games and enjoying them. And that then translates to this ability to be able to do really cool things like fly a drone with your switches or technology available. I think as a whole, it is a way to get engagement in therapy. But the best way to engage in therapy, from what I've been told, is to know you're actually not doing therapy. So by having fun and enjoying it, and then realizing, oh, this is kind of the same thing. Because later down in life, let's take that hypothetical child, Axel. Later in life, when he's like maybe using his tablet to communicate, he knows he can tap out letters on a keyboard and he'll get a response visually on screen. Or the same way, that he might be able to then type full sentences because he's learnt that when he taps something, he'll get a response and feedback straight away. And then that's how he can develop his communication through sentence structure and texting and messaging and so forth. Or using like, a communication board as well. Excuse me. So it does go later in life. I think it's just the process of starting early enough where the child can engage with these games, which is why I kind of looked at, ages of 2 and 3. Little ones probably might not grasp that concept yet, but ages 2 and 3 and up would be fantastic. And then they can kind of learn, okay, so I saw this in my game at home. It might apply the same way.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great.
And I'll hand back
Thank
to
you.
Leonie.
Thanks, Ross. And thank you again, Dom, for an amazing talk. And also, I'd just like to echo your thanks to the peoples whose ancestral lands you're on. And you've been kind enough to join us to give this talk for. That's an important thing.
Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome. For everyone who is tuned in, please head over to the YouTube channel and hit the like button to show your appreciation for Dom's talk. And while you're there, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and That way you can keep in touch with everything that goes on in our YouTube channel. Inclusive Design 2025 is brought to you with help from our platinum sponsors, Intopia and Accessibility Cloud. Our silver sponsors, our silver sponsor, Intuit. It's a little early in the conference for getting that jumbled up. But also our bronze sponsors, the Office of Lainey Feingold, Mantis & Co. and Vespero. Inclusive Design 24 will be back with you at the top of the hour. So go grab a coffee and we will see you in a few short minutes.